Hello, welcome to Censored. I am Lee Camp, host of Redacted tonight, here as always with Eleanor Goldfield,
Hello.
host of Act Out. You should check out our other shows, but we understand why you're checking out this one because in this one our powers combine to make us unstoppable. This is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff.
So let's dive on in. Let's get this kind of topical stuff out of the way. Although I am, this story is so infuriating to me that I am glad we're talking about it.
I'm going to warn everyone listening ahead of time that you should get out. So if you've ever read like War and Peace and you had to keep track of all the characters because there are like 14,000 of them, you might want to do the same thing. Get out like a pad and paper, and so that you can keep track of all this cast of characters that Lee's about to fucking throw at you, because it is quite it's basically like War and Peace, except it has a shittier ending.
All right, I don't know if I'm gonna get that deep into it, but you might want to have a pen with you. No, but basically, so you and I on our shows have talked about how insane what the media is doing right now, and not just the media, but the Democrats, some of the Republicans, about the Trump impeachment. Now, it's not that we think Trump is a good guy. We've listed many reasons he should be impeached that are far more important than the one they're going about right now. And you've done great work on, why impeachment is a waste of time, why Mike Pence is just as scary, if not scarier, et cetera, et cetera. I want to jump past all of that and just you can, with your pen that you've gotten out, you can write up at the top, Lee and Eleanor fucking hate Trump. This is not a defense of Trump. This is just a defense of the truth. So we know that Russiagate fucking collapsed as we like a poorly cooked flan. As we all thought it would, well, not all of us, but as many of us doing independent journalism thought or knew it would. And so now what Trump has been doing, and, you can argue about the legality of whether he's allowed to do it or not, but what he's been doing with Attorney General Barr, who, again, giant dipshit, but that doesn't change the facts, is try to get to the bottom of what created the Russiagate, hoax, for lack of a better term. This was and look, I hate it as much as you do when Trump is right, but it was a witch hunt and it was a hoax, and there is nothing there. And there's a lot of great evidence that the leak from the DNC that went to WikiLeaks came from within the DNC. And the mainstream media, to try and their latest thing, which I hadn't heard them use this tact before, this one really made me crack up. I heard them say this today, is that Trump and his folks are pushing a conspiracy that the DNC hacked themselves to get back at him. And that is not what it is. There's a lot of evidence that a disenchanted DNC employee, what are the odds someone inside the DNC could fucking think that they're corrupt or discover that they're corrupt and reveal it? That is not that shocking. Gave the emails to WikiLeaks. There's been no proven connection to Russia. So moving beyond that, Trump is pressuring governments, again, you can argue about the legality, but pressuring governments to look into certain things about this. And then there's the whole Biden thing. I think we've both done coverage of how corrupt that situation is, the coup in Ukraine. But I just want to get into basically three characters here, really two important ones that you don't hear mentioned much in the mainstream media. And when you do, they just caveat it with Trump created this conspiracy. And by the way, anytime you hear the mainstream media say that, just keep in mind they pushed a Russiagate conspiracy theory for fucking 2 years. Like, they should be laughing at themselves every time they say conspiracy theory. So, the biggest player in this is Joseph Mifsud, who is a Maltese professor. He lives in Italy. Up until now, I thought Maltese was like a dog or something.
Also, yes.
He might be a dog. I don't know. I've never seen a photo of him. Very well could be a dog. He apparently told George Papadopoulos, an unpaid volunteer or unpaid something for the Trump campaign, that there was coming down the pike, there was a bunch of emails that Russia had that were going to hurt Hillary. Papadopoulos goes running the Trump campaign and apparently alerts them, and Trump, although actually I don't even know if he alerted them. Anyway, that's a side point. But so Trump wants to know, where did Mifsud get this information? And furthermore, Mueller indicted everyone who lied to the Mueller report, but did not indict Mifsud. And so the question is, who the fuck is this Mifsud guy who is now vanished? He's vanished, and no one can find him. And they're trying to figure out, it seems quite likely that he is a CIA asset. He has contacts to the CIA. And then a second character involved in the whole Russiagate thing was Konstantin Kalemnik, who we've learned from all those several mainstream outlets, The Hill and others, that he is a State Department asset. And it was not revealed in the Mueller report.
And how is he tied into this?
Kalemnik, he also was indicted for some shenanigans, but I don't remember the details. So the Mueller report says, look, here is the character that connects Russia to this. Here is the character that revealed that Russia had these emails. Both of them seem to be State Department asset, CIA asset, and Trump, through his fucking guileless, lumbering, elephantile mannerisms, is lurching through in a probably illegal way, trying to get to the bottom of where this started. And so it seems quite possible that this now impeachment on something that is quite common for the U.S. to do, pressure governments into doing things for us, is the CIA deep state stopping Trump from continuing this investigation. And keep in mind, both the whistleblowers who have come forward that created this impeachment inquiry are CIA. And anyway, those are that's the rough outline of it. And it's, it's, I fucking hate Trump, and there's a million things I hate about him, but in this area, he's probably right. He's probably looking for what created the Russiagate hoax.
So is this going to turn into what's that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio about the dream within a dream shit?
Inception.
Is this going to turn into an Inception type situation where
I feel like you told me that before.
It's it's a conspiracy within a conspiracy within a conspiracy type thing. Like, it's a conspiracy about Russiagate that's now inside the conspiracy about the impeachment that's going to be inside the conspiracy for another fucking conspiracy. It's like turtles all the way down.
It is turtles all the way down. But it just amazes me because now they're like you see the mainstream media and the Democrats doing damage control. And today on the media, they're running around, and New York Times did this as well in a report this morning. They're running around going, Trump is pushing this conspiracy theory that came from 4chan and blah, blah, blah. And look, Trump says lies and fake things all the time. But in this area, which I'm not even sure he understands, but in this area, he's probably getting closer to the truth than normal. And it's just funny to watch the mainstream media scamper around to try and, defend whistleblowers. How funny do you think it is that they're defending whistleblowers right now?
Oh, well, and I talked about this on my show, so everyone go watch that. But yeah, that's basically what I said. It's ridiculous that they're defending quote-unquote whistleblowers, but it's not really a whistleblower because he's not blowing the whistle on, like what Kiriakou did with regards to blowing the whistle on the CIA torture program, or what Chelsea Manning has done, blowing the whistle on our drone program, or Daniel Hale, who's done a similar blowing the whistle on our drone bombing. So yeah, this is not, again, and I covered this on the show, so I don't want to spend time here regurgitating it because we've got a lot of shit to go through.
We got a lot of shit to go through, but I just wanted to cut through that so that you all out there had something to think about. And let's move on to our next quick bit of topical news that we got to come up with a different word than topical because almost everything we talk about is topical. But I'll say mainstream media news. So Bernie Sanders, as you know, he had some sort of heart issue. He now seems to be very much on the recovery. But it's been just incredible to watch the mainstream media suddenly talk about Bernie Sanders as if they care, as if they give a flying shit about Bernie's campaign. They've done nothing but ignore Bernie Sanders every step of this goddamn campaign because they do not want to say his name. They do not want anyone to know he's even running, even though he took in more money this last quarter than anyone, despite not taking corporate donors. Meanwhile, Pete Buttigieg got $19 million from about 4 people. So,
and Biden slipping significantly, even though he only gets money from fucking billionaires and millionaires.
Right. And so they do not want to say Bernie Sanders' name, but all of a sudden he has a heart issue or heart attack or whatever it is. I know they love calling it a heart attack. Maybe it was, but
they had a stent put in. I don't know if that means he had a heart attack.
Well, they're now
there's a blockage, right?
The mainstream media is now turned to calling it a heart attack. Okay. So, but they act like they care for him. Today on CNN, they go, "We're going to go to our correspondent who's with the Bernie campaign," and he goes, "Bernie's doing very well. He took a walk today around his neighborhood," and then they cut back to the anchor, and she goes, "That is just great to see. That is really wonderful to see." Like you give a fuck about Bernie Sanders.
Well, you don't, and that's why you're covering it, because you want to remind everybody that he's fucking old.
I know. Now the reports are just becoming... Bernie Sanders just had a heart attack, and we want to talk more about heart attacks. So we're going to go, and apparently Bernie Sanders gave a heart attack walk, that he gave a heart attack speech, and his heart attack plan, heart attack, and heart attack. So let's go to our heart attack right now, who's out in heart attack, standing there in the rain. By the way, Bernie Sanders also just came out with a detailed plan, which I don't think any of the other candidates have, on getting money out of politics. An actual point-by-point on how to fucking do that. So that's kind of important. Mm-hmm. Okay, quick note before we get into everything else. If you feel like you get $1 worth out of our podcast, or maybe more, please go over to patreon.com/commoncensored. This podcast, as I hope you've noticed, is funded completely and utterly by your membership at patreon.com/commoncensored. We have no ads for anything other than for our own, shows or whatever, but the sponsors are not paying us. So this podcast is all done by you. Patreon.com/commoncensored. And thank you so much to all the new members. We have a lot of new members in the past few weeks, and you guys make this work possible.
Yes, indeedy. So now we get into the shit that I like getting into. The stuff that's not at all even talked about on corporate media. But of course, yes, it's important to cover the shit that's covered wrongly on corporate media. But so a recent report that took the Federal Reserve's newly released distributive financial accounts data, which is a fancy way of saying this is how fucking unequal our country is.
I'm glad you analyzed that, because I was literally just going to say, what the fuck does that mean?
Or you were just literally about to pass out from boredom, because this is why they name shit these names, because it sounds so oppressively boring that you're like, I would rather read the phone book, not that those exist anymore anyway, but I would rather find an old phone book and read it and try to memorize it than read anything named distributive financial accounts data. So the People's Policy Project broke down this information and found that this is the top 1% owns nearly $30 trillion of assets, while the bottom half owns less than nothing, meaning that they have more debts than they have assets. So
less than nothing.
Less than nothing. And for folks listening to this, you're probably like, yeah, that's me. But also 30 trillion, like the GDP of Great Britain is what, like 6 trillion or something?
I think it's 3.
Okay. The entire worth of our entire fucking stock market is $18 trillion.
Right.
Now, here's a little conspiracy theory for you folks. Remember, if you will, that Lee Camp wrote a really fascinating article about, and then covered it on his show, about how the Pentagon has lost or misplaced $21 trillion. Well, here's a zinger for you. Between 1989 and 2018, the top 1% increased its total net worth by $21 trillion. Maybe that's where the money went.
Coincidence? I think not.
And of course, because of that, because it's got to come from somewhere, right? And footnote, I'm being sarcastic about the Pentagon. Please don't email me and say that that's a stupid conspiracy theory. I know it's a joke. During that same time, the bottom 50% saw its net worth decrease by $900 billion. So these numbers are so atrociously large, it's hard to wrap your head around it. Basically, the bottom line, literally and figuratively here, is that our country is so astronomically unequal that more than 0.5% of the country has less than zero, and the top 1% has more, almost twice as much as what our entire stock market is worth. That's really like all you need to know.
No, not almost twice as much, but
18 times 2 is 36, 30 trillion.
I thought they gained 21 trillion.
They gained 21 trillion, which now equals $30 trillion of assets.
Okay. Gotcha.
So everyone has their pen and paper, so follow along because Lee doesn't have his pen and paper, so you're going to have to follow along
I only have a highlighter. What do I do with that?
Why do you only have a highlighter?
As Mitch Hedberg said, I wrote a letter in highlighter because I wanted to, but I thought someone was just showing me parts of a piece of paper. But, and so... This shouldn't be, the numbers should be a surprise, maybe, but the idea should not be a surprise because this is how capitalism works. It is a slow extraction. There's a gravity of capitalism, and that gravity slowly extracts the wealth of a society to a tiny number of individuals. And every once in a while, if the society's not going to collapse, the workers, the people will stand up and decrease those numbers again by breaking up the big entities, the big corporations, by putting a very large tax on the top percentage, by having things like a estate tax for when someone dies, the money goes back to the society. All of those things are ways of basically bringing this back down so that the society can keep going. However, it seems very likely that we are now at a point that that's not happening. The workers have been so gutted. The unions have been so gutted. The ability to speak out and on your mainstream media doesn't exist unless you support these things. So the gravity is basically running away from itself. We're becoming a black hole of financial suck that just goes up to the 1%.
And another thing that is another story that is evidence of that whole concept is recently. In a hearing on October the 3rd, the IRS basically acknowledged that it doesn't audit the rich as much as the poor because it's easier to go after the poor. Because
they were asked. So basically, Congress said to them, "Why is it you're not going after kind of corporate entities and things?" And they just said, "It's hard."
Yeah, so basically, the IRS commissioner Charles Reddick was speaking in front of the Senate, and when Senator Ron Wyden in particular asked Reddick for a plan to fix the imbalance in going after the poor versus the rich, and Reddick said that he would like that, but I mean that's basically like saying, yeah, no, I'd like world peace, but there's no actual evidence to suggest that anything's moving forward on that front. But basically, there are two reasons why the IRS does this. First of all, auditing poor taxpayers is a lot easier. The agency uses low-level employees, i.e. ones that aren't trained that well and ones that they have to pay less, to audit returns for low-income taxpayers. So the poor are going after the poor because... literally, that's how sick our system is. They're watching the poor go after the poor, and they're their little
Well, divide and conquer, right?
Absolutely,
divide and conquer.
So basically, the audits on low income taxpayers, of which there were roughly 380,000 last year, which accounted for 39% of the total that the IRS conducted, are done by mail for low-income taxpayers, and they don't take much staff time either. And they are, as Reddick noted, the most efficient use of available IRS examination resources.
And part of the reason it takes so much more money to go after these corporations is because also our criminal justice system is weighted towards them in the way it's set up. I mean, when you get the largest number of high-powered lawyers that are going to, teams of lawyers that are going against, let's say, a little IRS guy, and And, I saw something similar in court where you had the government lawyer going up against a massive accounting firm that did these corporate accounts that allowed them to use tax loopholes. And it's like 4 people versus 40 in the courtroom, like just table after table after table of lawyers in black suits with laptops out. And then you've got one guy with his shoddy little briefcase being like, excuse me, Your Honor. And it's like the numbers are just astronomical. Like the idea that a couple of people can take on these corporate law firms that are being paid millions and millions of dollars to do this type of law, it is very difficult. And basically the IRS has just, their budget's been gutted, their number of people's been gutted.
Well, and that's the other point is that, so there are 2 reasons. One is that it's easier to go after the poor, and the second is that it's difficult to go after the rich. It takes more advanced examiners to go through the tax returns of the rich, because of course they know all these loopholes, so their paperwork is like fucking hundreds and hundreds of pages of like, I'm gonna claim this, and I got this other thing over here, and I've got an island in the fucking whatever the fuck. So it's a lot more difficult to go through their tax returns. It's not just like a fucking 1099 and you're done.
And loopholes are designed to be convoluted and confusing. That's why they're loopholes. Like, if it were easy to understand, then it wouldn't work as a tax loophole, because the IRS would just glance at it and go, you're fucking cheating.
Right. And
people aren't usually declaring the goldfish as dependent. It's not usually that easy.
Oh, is that something you can't do? I've declared my plants as dependents.
Oh, they're dependent. That's why they always die.
I know I'm not a very good parent, but so and you already mentioned this, Lee, but the budget for the IRS has been cut significantly, and guess who gets fired first? It's the more experienced folks that are the ones that know how to and can go after the more wealthy tax frauds. So
probably because they have the more expensive salaries, right? They've been there longer.
And this is, of course, why Congress has voted to cut the funding to the IRS, because they are the wealthy assholes that are going to be audited. They're friends with the wealthy assholes that are going to get audited, that should be audited. But that's, of course, and of course, like the other part of this that this hearing didn't really get into, of course, is that our tax code is completely fakaked from the get-go. Just the idea that, a teacher who makes $35,000 a year could be in a higher tax bracket than one of the Koch brothers is fucking absurd. So at its core, our tax code is just complete and utter bullshit. But on top of that, you then have the folks that are being squeezed for even more of their taxes are the ones who are the poorest and already the most marginalized in this extreme income inequality, as opposed to the rich, who very often pay no taxes and then, of course, don't get audited on that because they have, as you noted, Lee, a bunch of, like, an army of fucking lawyers and ways to get around ever being audited.
And by the way, right now we at least have one listener who's going, and plus federal income tax is illegal, because there's actually no law requiring federal income tax.
That's right. And there's actually there's a pretty solid group of war tax resistors in this country. And you can find out how to join them if you want. And that basically means that you pay state and local taxes, to fund your roads and your schools and whatnot in your local state. But you don't pay federal taxes because that's where the military budget comes from. Of course, there's military spending that goes on the state and local level as well. Let's not be fooled by that. But understand that there are issues if you do want to be a war tax resistor. For instance, if you're on Medicaid, then they'll threaten to take that away. They could threaten to garnish your wages and things like that. But for folks who are interested in at least learning more about that and learning about the successful fight that a lot of people have waged against paying federal taxes, you can check out the National War Tax Resistors Coalition.
The pooper scooper plastic bags at the dog park, is it local taxes that pay for those, or is that federal?
That's me, actually.
You pay for those?
Yeah.
Thanks for doing that.
No problem.
Appreciate you bringing those out there.
Yeah, so now hopping over...
Let's keep rolling.
So today, and we're recording as you may have noticed, we're recording this
We're
on...
filming? I gotta put on pants.
No, that's... Why do you think we have so many viewers?
Oh, okay.
We're recording this on Monday, October the 7th in the evening.
On
so,
an 8-track player.
So you don't even know what that is, do you?
Nope.
So today, Monday, October 7th, was an international rebellion for Extinction Rebellion, and efforts and big actions took place all over the world.
They did one of my favorites today.
What's that?
Covering the Wall Street Bull in blood.
I know, that was
I
cool.
love it.
That was
I had
cool.
actually, when I saw that they dumped like tons of blood in London. And when I saw they did that, I was like, do it on the Capitol building. Here, do it. But I like the bull. The bull was a good call.
Yeah, no, the bull is a good call. And, you know, it took place in London, of course.
They put those little matador sticks sticking out of the bull.
Oh, sad.
Yeah, but he's the Wall Street Bull. He's
I
evil.
know,
He's an
but
evil
we
titan of industry.
We shouldn't condone the animal.
Yeah, but he's like a billionaire, that bull. His balls are made out of gold. Have you seen him?
I thought that's just because people rub them for good luck.
They do.
Anywho, so yeah, if you check on Twitter, you can see actions from Germany and from London and from New York and France and a bunch of other countries as well. And so one of the things that I wanted to acknowledge this was happening, and these rebellions are ongoing. So check out to see if there's any rebellions happening in your area, and you can easily find that by checking out the Extinction Rebellion website and then clicking on the map. But I wanted to mention that to give a thumbs up, but also to note that recent report shows that the UK has refused to stop spending billions of pounds on fossil fuel projects across the world. And this is news that came out last week. So basically, the UK government rejected calls from MPs to stop spending billions on overseas fossil fuel projects. And this is after, you may recall that Extinction Rebellion forced a decision in the UK Parliament to declare a climate emergency. So this news comes after that climate emergency has been declared, meaning that...
Right.
Yeah. So, and this is not me shitting on Extinction Rebellion. I have some mixed feelings about Extinction Rebellion, but on the whole, I think that this very loud and visual display of climate chaos and calling for climate justice is very important. But I think it's also very important that we recognize that when a government declares a climate emergency, again, it's like the head of the IRS being like, I wish we could audit rich folks. It's like fucking Nancy Pelosi saying, no, I really care about the future for our children. Can I have some more of that oil money? Like, these declarations mean nothing. They mean absolutely nothing. They are empty fucking words.
Well, and this goes also with the Paris Climate Accord, which everyone flipped out. Well, our mainstream media, which never talks about climate change until Trump pulled out of the climate deal, and then they said, oh my God, he's pulling out of the climate deal. But that climate accord had no way of enforcing.
It was totally spineless.
It was, yes, it's great to have all those countries come together. It's great to have them acknowledge that climate change is a thing. But if you just have an accord with nothing to enforce what it's saying, then you're just going to have people, because they signed something again to something like 170 countries, several years back. I don't remember, it was 2014, 2015, signed something to increase biodiversity because they realized biodiversity was dying and it's harmful to us. And so all these countries said, we're going to do something about it. And 4 years later, no one's done anything. There's been no change because there was nothing to enforce any of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also important to note that declaration, or the decision of the UK to not stop supporting these fossil fuel projects has to do with fossil fuel projects around the world. So this is including a Bahraini oil refinery. This is gas drilling platforms in Mozambique. So this isn't just, and of course we understand that climate change is not a local issue anyway, but this isn't just the UK being like, yeah, we're gonna keep fucking shit up here. They're like, we're gonna fuck shit up elsewhere. This is the good old fucking empire being like, no, we're still fucking with these countries. Don't you worry. We are definitely still on board with the climate emergency, but in the meantime, we're going to make sure that the climate is absolutely destroyed in these other areas while we stand by our, declaration of a climate emergency. So this isn't just like simply saying we're going to keep fracking at home. This is also saying that we're going to fuck up these other already marginalized, quote unquote, third world countries and that will be and already are bearing the large brunt of climate chaos, and that this is the UK saying that we want to perpetuate that.
And these choices are often long term. I mean, fossil fuel projects are many years in the making and many years until they'll be fully exploited. And why that matters is because these are investments that they're hoping will pay off later. So right now, the estimate is that these oil companies and fossil fuel companies have $2 trillion in investments that they're hoping will pay off, already laid out. Drilling platforms already out there, tar sands pipelines they're building, et cetera, et cetera. And so if we stop right now using fossil fuels, they lose that $2 trillion. So basically, you're putting a giant incentive for them to keep burning fossil fuels by creating these projects.
Well, yeah, and of course that ties into the report that came out several years ago that showed that if any of the world's largest industries actually had to pay for the destruction that they cause, then none of them would be profitable. Which basically means that
pay for the destruction you cause.
Of course, when
stop being so silly. I thought this wasn't a comedy podcast.
See, this is what happens. I'm funny when I don't mean to be. But so there's that aspect of it, and that's not even counting the government subsidies. We subsidize fossil fuels in this country to an astronomical extent. I don't have the numbers in front of me right at the moment, but to a crazy amount. And so that's when people are like, I don't understand. People say that, oil prices have gone down and, fracking, we don't get as much for natural gas as as other countries do. Well, it's because we subsidize it. Our government subsidizes coal and fracked gas and oil. Like, we actually pay to destroy our future.
And there's very little subsidies to renewables and green energy. There's Obama tried to put in some little ones here and there, and the Fox News ran around saying it's not feasible and he's spending government money on windmills and it was tiny amounts, and now I think they've taken a lot of them away. And
So I just found an article from May of this year in Rolling Stone. It's a study that found that U.S. fossil fuel subsidies actually exceed Pentagon spending, according to the IMF.
I didn't know anything exceeded Pentagon spending.
So apparently, the direct and indirect subsidies for coal, oil, and gas in the United States reached $649 billion in 2015. Pentagon spending that same year was $599 billion. That's, of course, we should say, of course, that's the above board spending. So actually that's not true, because of course the Pentagon has that secret budget. You remember we mentioned the $21 trillion. So it has a secret budget that we know nothing about. The above board spending was almost $600 billion.
Well, the black budget brings the Pentagon to, and intelligence communities and stuff brings it to like $1 trillion. And that's not necessarily counting the $21 trillion of unaccounted adjustments. So you've got $1 trillion a year even without that.
Right, exactly. So it's not actually more than the Pentagon budget, but it's still pretty fucking insane that we subsidize. And when I say we, I mean like you and me, and the tax. If you pay taxes in the U.S., you are part of this, subsidizing coal, oil, and gas in 2015 for $649 billion.
So we're paying for our own extinction.
Yeah.
Is that where they got that name, Extinction Rebellion? I thought it had to do with something else.
So, speaking of something else.
Let's get to a kind of fun topic. Although we will probably
not really.
we'll probably still talk about a dystopian future. But
I mean, is it really fun? Because okay, so new
parts
scientist.
of it are fun. What about like a talking bidet?
Actually, didn't your brother have one of those?
Yeah, I think he did.
That like said the name of the person that was walking into the bed. That's fucking terrifying.
Well, it had to wait till it saw your ass to figure out which one you were.
Yeah, that's the question. How did it know?
Different asses for different.
But that's terrifying.
Different strokes for different folks.
Oh my god. What if you get ass implants? All right. Well, this is okay. I'm not getting it. I'm not getting a bidet. Period. That's what you have a shower head for. Anyway, so
Wait, what just happened?
a shower head.
Every time you go to the bathroom, you stick your ass in the shower?
What do you think I'm in there so long?
Jesus Christ.
You know, I did know a guy that had to shower every time he shit.
I do know that Andre the Giant apparently would shit in bathtubs because he couldn't fit on the toilet.
Stop it. No.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what do you do with it?
Turn on the shower.
That doesn't make any sense. It's solid. It's not going down the drain.
Oh, you shower it long enough, I guess.
Oh. Can't unhear that.
He didn't fit on the toilet. What do you want him to do?
I don't know. Get that pooper scooper.
Oh, that's even worse.
Well, you can't. Oh, my God.
You know, I was really hoping we get to this topic.
All right. I'm just. Oh, my God.
Google it, folks. Andre the Giant shits. But
Okay. Before you do that, before we lose everyone on that fucking tangent. So, New Scientist just recently released this article titled Predicting the Future is Now Possible with Powerful New AI Simulations. So basically, AI modeling is now capable of simulating accurately the behavior of entire cities and perhaps one day entire countries and perhaps the world. So...
And like... They're thinking these will be relatively accurate, and they can give you like multiple outcomes depending on certain variables, I would assume.
So basically, these are it's an artificial, and this is not a commentary about whether or not we're a simulation. I think that's just that argument. That fucking argument is basically just like a Google nerds excuse for or it's a Google nerds answer to religion.
We got in this fight before. I think we have definitely talked about this on the podcast, but
yes.
it was like 8 months ago or something.
Yes, but no, we're not living in a simulation, folks. This is actually as good and as bad as it gets, and it's all too fucking real.
Well, and the end point of whether you wanted to believe something like that or not is the same end point as religion, which is people can end up going, well, either it's religion or God has it under control, or it's a simulation, and therefore I don't need to work on caring about climate change or caring about recycling. God's got it. Dude's got it covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what I mean. It's like it's a technologist's answer to Jesus and God and the Holy Ghost and all that other shit. So that's not this conversation. This is actually like there are scientists that are building simulations that are basically built to parallel or mirror our societies, but in a way that can get us answers to questions quicker, so that they can advance the societies in a way that they're like, oh, well, we've built a simulation based on, these companies competing against each other. What's going to happen to the economy?
So I would think this could be a very, whereas I have plenty of qualms with AI, and I think we're going to get into some of them in a minute, but I think this could be a definite positive, because I would assume that you could run 100 simulations on capitalism, and you're always going to end up with it ultimately spiraling out of control and putting all the wealth in a tiny number of hands.
Well, so here's where it gets, and yes, to get to your first point, the article mentions an instance where there was a simulation about an Ebola epidemic, that like the one that broke out in West Africa, and basically there were computer modelers that predicted how the epidemic would progress. And let me just go back for a second and explain how this works. The agent, it's called agent-based modeling, and what it does is it uses strings of computer code to represent agents, like a bicycle. What do you call those guys?
I have no idea what's happening right now.
the bike guys that deliver your
Unicycle.
fucking that
Uber Eats.
sure. Uber Eats, bike messenger. God damn it, where are you?
I don't know what we're
Helping
talking
me
about
out here.
I don't know what's happening right now.
So
a minute ago you were talking about AI, and now we're on to
agent-based
bikes.
Follow me here. Where's your pen and paper? God damn it. Agent-based modeling uses strings of computer code to represent a bike messenger or to represent companies that are competing in an economy. And they're programmed to interact with each other in this virtual environment the way that you and I would interact with that bike messenger, how these companies would interact. So they basically use these codes to represent how complex systems like our cities work and predict how they would evolve and testing what happens if you intervene in different ways, like, you know, if you pass this bill or if you fucking actually did something about the climate chaos. So they're able to add that into the code and then see what happens in an accelerated world.
Well,
so for instance, to your point about this could be good, when the Ebola epidemic broke out in West Africa, there were computer modelers that were able to predict how the epidemic would progress based on real-world data on case numbers, infection rates, healthcare systems, population distribution, demographics, economic and social interactions, travel patterns, etc. And it predicted that basically this, like a certain section would be it would be best if this section adopted quarantine measures and safe burial practices. And in the end, infections were restricted to 28,000 people as opposed to 1.4 million people, which is what the simulation predicted if it was left unchecked.
Maybe we should just quarantine D.C.
Is this where Ebola started?
And no, to get all the politicians to die out. And then the country would do better.
NSA, I just like to say that I do not condone that message. I had nothing to do with it. So basically, that computer model wasn't like responsible for the Ebola response, but that's an example of how computer models could predict something and say like, hey, you should put more medics in that area.
Right.
So yes, I agree with you. However, to your point about like, we would always find that capitalism is fucked up. Well, but who's inputting the information and what information about capitalism? You know, if like Ayn Rand is the input about capitalism, then that computer simulation is going to be like, this is the best thing ever.
Hold on. So I agree that we are creating these algorithms, and you can easily create racist algorithms. Just to give an example, I'm using racism as an example. And we've discussed that on this show before, such as the judges in certain states are already using algorithms to decide whether to give bail to defendants, and they found out that those algorithms are racist unintentionally. It's not like some programmer said, if he's black, he fucking did it. It's not like that. It's like far more complicated. But you could get to a level of a number of variables that, real world variables that are not really a decision. They're like, you put that there are this many companies, that they, make this much money and they do this, and there are this many people, and, a lot of statistics about an area. And as long as you weren't putting in opinions, as long as you were putting in just a totality of information, it could get so complicated that kind of humans couldn't, tilted in a certain way. It'd be too complicated for us to intentionally manipulate the thing.
Well, it's not necessarily about whether we would manipulate it. It's about the information that we put into it. And so hypothetically, let's say that you have somebody who believes that Russiagate is real, and they're putting in information about how to make our elections more democratic. Well, if you put in information that suggests that Russia had anything to do with our fucked up elections, but don't put in shit about interstate cross-check and, voter ID laws and things like that, then your result, your suggestion as to how to deal with the simulation properly is going to be completely fucking wrong.
Right, fair enough.
And the other problem is...
I think you're probably right to a large extent. I think that you could get to a level that's so complex and so large that one opinionated bullshit like Russiagate was real wouldn't necessarily fuck it up. If we're talking about something much larger than just an election algorithm or whatever.
Well, true, but I mean, they're using these simulations to ask those questions. So, what do we do about climate change? Okay, well, the fracking industry says that it's a bridge fuel, so let's frack more. Like, these systems continue to be more and more complex, and the writers of this article admit that, like, okay, we don't have down pat how these, like, quote unquote agents in this simulation interact with each other, because the breadth of human interaction is, we can't actually simulate that. It's too seemingly random, right? But at the same time, we are looking to these simulations to answer questions. And the scary part of that is that it suggests that humans can kind of back off and be like, like those judges, they can be like, I'll just look at this fucking algorithm. I don't have to use my own head and hear the same thing. It's like, you could look at the simulation and say, oh, well, the simulation, which is obviously smarter than me, says that fracking is a bridge fuel. Therefore, we should frack.
So you're basically getting you're basically getting to what I wanted to read. So I wanted to do this for a bit. I told you about this book that I picked up, thinking it might have some good points in it, and then slowly realized it was a pile of shit. But,
oh man, I hate when that happens.
But it's a hit book, and I think so. This is the information that I think a lot of your average kind of liberals mainly are taking in and thinking this is legitimate. This is a legitimate way to see the world. And I don't know if some of you out there have read any of this author, but his name is Yuval Noah Harari, and I think his hit book was Sapiens, which I have not read. But this one is called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And it is a bunch of things about our current world. And I wanted to talk specifically about the AI chapter and read you some passages.
Story time.
Story time. And by the way, it's got a dazzling review. It says dazzling, reviewed by The Guardian on the front of the book. And this is the more I read it, this is the type of guy who probably, believes when the New York Times tells him that Russians hacked the election by putting 4 Facebook ads out. But he's not really saying that type of thing, which is why it's kind of insidious, is that he's not actively trying to be political. Instead, he's talking more about kind of predicting our future and everything. And I'm about to read a passage about AI. Now, he's talking about AI, but he's not talking about prediction of society per se. But anyway, you'll see what I mean. But it's tough to know which to read you first. But so he goes, so he's basically a futurist in a lot of ways, in that he's trying to tell you what the future is going to be like. And he goes, once artificial intelligence makes better decisions than us about careers and perhaps even relationships, our concept of humanity and of life will have to change. Humans are used to thinking about life as a drama of decision-making. Liberal democracy and free market capitalism see the individual as an autonomous agent constantly making choices about the world. And he goes on, and maybe I should read the next part here, but he goes on to basically say that AI should make the decision. Yeah, I'm going to read this. What will happen to this view of life as we increasingly rely on AI to make decisions for us? At present, we trust Netflix to recommend movies and Google Maps to choose whether to turn right or left. But once a lot of people do. But once we begin to count on AI to decide what to study, where to work, who to marry, human life will cease to be a drama of decision making. So he's talking about this as a positive. Democratic elections and free markets will make little sense. So would most religions and works of art. So now you probably like the part where he says religion will become obsolete. But the other part where he's like, we'll be able to get rid of this drama of decision making. It sounds like utter dystopia.
That sounds terrible.
It sounds like utter dystopia.
Isn't that what arranged marriages were left behind for?
Well-
Because you want to be able to be like, no, not that guy. I don't care if he makes. I don't care if he likes it. I want to make my own fucking decision. Like, isn't that the whole fucking point?
And furthermore, if you make a mistake in a relationship, which most people have, ultimately, imagine if it hadn't been you that made that decision. Now you're just like, that fucking machine told me to fucking marry you. Like, but when it's your own decision, at least you're culpable for it. At least you know that you did that.
Yeah, that was on me.
So let me read one other part. As authority shifts from humans to algorithms, and by the way, he seems to have no concept of what you're talking about, that we would create racist algorithms, that we create fucked up analysis.
Well, no, because if he's willing to fuck whoever the robot tells him to, I'm sure he doesn't think that robot is going to tell him to fuck someone like racist or...
As authority shifts from humans to algorithms, we may no longer see the world as the playground of autonomous individuals struggling to make the right choices. Instead, we might perceive the entire universe as a flow of data, see organisms as little more than biochemical algorithms, and believe that humanity's cosmic vocation is to create an all-encompassing data processing system and then merge into it. Already today, we are becoming tiny chips inside a giant data processing system that nobody really understands. Now, here's the thing. Some of that I don't disagree with, but what I wrote in the margin is, why is he not screaming this with blood dripping down his chin? Like, the only way to read that paragraph is... Like, it's fucking horrifying. Like, imagine that same sentence that I just read you, except read like, already today we're becoming tiny chips inside a giant data processing system that nobody understands.
I know.
Like, that's honestly how it should be. But instead he's talking about it like, oh, this is what's happening. Isn't it nice?
Well, and I've met people like this, technologists who love the idea of basically being just kind of a passive agent in this kind of basically like the Matrix, where you're leaning back in that fucking ship and you're just having everything happen to you.
Because they think that the computers are going to be programmed all to benefit us and help us and be nice to us. And
well, right. Or philosophically, they say, like, even if it's not and you don't know the difference, kind of like the Matrix, like, you don't know that it's all a fucking lie and you don't know that it's actually this fucking horror show, then why do you care? You know, ignorance is bliss. Blue pill, red pill type shit. So literally, like, there are people like that, and I think that's fucking terrifying, and it scares the ever-loving shit out of me. But yeah, like, what the fuck? I mean, it's...
So... So
if people can't see this because it's not filmed, but I'm like in fetal position right now.
She's in a fetal position. But I'm not disagreeing that this could be where we're headed and that there's a lot of scary scary warnings that we're headed there. But he's talking about it as if it's a positive or it's an okay thing. And I think it should be talked about as, how are we going to stop this? How are we going to stop the exponential growth of the technology that is quickly making us obsolete? And when we become obsolete, it's not like we'll be left to our own devices to be free, loving human beings and do what we want with our lives. We will then be plugged into this data system. Like,
well, right. Like, has this guy never seen Black Mirror? The whole...
Apparently never, no.
Or just even thought about it philosophically, like, what, you know, if there are data chips in your wrist, like, couldn't they just turn you off?
Right,
or,
right.
You know, like, I mean, it's so...
Well, I'll give you... Hold on, I'll come back to the AI thing in a second, but I want to show you how he thinks. He's talking about killer robots that have an algorithm deciding whether to, kill something. And he talks about how that'll be beneficial because soldiers won't have to die and things like that. And then he goes, however, a ruthless dictator armed with such killer robots will never have to fear that his soldiers will turn against him, no matter how heartless and crazy his orders. A ruthless dictator, as if we aren't currently using drones to bomb innocent civilians. Like, he imagines that we are this pure American entity, and he may even be Israeli, so U.S. and Israel, this pure entity and we are doing the right thing. But imagine, what if our technology got into the hands of some sort of bad guy?
Well, and this also leads to the question, is technology inherently bad? Like, is drone technology, for instance, inherently bad? Of course not.
No.
You know, drone, and I think you even have a joke about this. Like, drones could deliver fucking food to people. Drones could deliver, could save people from their roofs in the middle of a hurricane. Like, drones could do amazing shit. It's just that now we predominantly use them to kill people.
Well, and most of our
and surveil.
Most of our biggest technological advancements are either created by the military or quickly adopted by the military.
Absolutely.
But so I want to get to this. This is another interesting part. He's talking about AI, and he gets to the car, and he gets into the philosophy question. The philosophy question. And he's talking about, and a lot of people have had this discussion about like Tesla, auto driving and robotic cars and things. And he talks about how, well, the car will, become better than humans at not hitting pedestrians. However, there will also come moments where the car has to decide, do I swerve out of the way of this pedestrian and possibly hit these 5 people on the sidewalk, or do I hit the pedestrian and save the 5 people on the sidewalk?
Would you kill the fat man question?
Right. It's the would you kill the fat man philosophy question. Now, I'm fine with asking that question of ourselves, in this moment. But he goes on to say, so these questions will become quite prevalent with our cars, as an example. And he goes, maybe philosophy will become a great field to go into because there will be a lot of need for philosophers in this future world. And I'm like, as if corporations have ever given a fuck about the philosophy of who dies and who doesn't. They sit there and pollute water and kill people, give people cancers, round up herbicide, killing all the bees. Do you think at any point Monsanto sat down with a table of philosophers and said, we're going to create this herbicide. Should we care whether people get cancer from it?
Well, and also, it will be a good field to go into. How about right now, before we get to this fucking dystopia? Where are the philosophers now that are sitting there being like, actually, no? And there have been lots of philosophers throughout history that have gotten flack for talking shit about technology. Nietzsche is one of them. But okay, so obviously, I think that the question as to whether technology wholesale is a good or bad thing is a silly question, because technology is whatever you make of it. But this type of shit is terrifying because he's basically saying that we should sit back and let technology that, as you noted, is basically created for, of, and by the fucking military, we should let that happen to us.
Right.
As these sort of like open and malleable participants in this, what does he fucking call it, like democracy?
Data processing system?
No, I think he used the word democracy, which is really funny. So I like, as if we're just sitting back and letting this all happen to us, and there's nothing we can do about it, even if there were, we shouldn't.
Well, and he talks about all the positives, which is how they sell this stuff to us initially. So he talks about how, earlier in the book, he says, how Netflix analyzes your choices. And right now it's okay at it, but eventually it'll get amazing at it. And it won't even have to do with whether you click a button that says you like something. He goes, eventually your TV or laptop will always be watching your facial expressions, and whether you say you like something or not, it will know whether you liked it. So you may type, I didn't like that gay sex scene, but it'll know you secretly did like that gay sex scene. And he's like, so it'll know everything about you. And most of the time he's talking about this as if it's a positive, as opposed to a Black Mirror episode.
I know. Well, and that's the really creepy thing. And I think these kind of people are terrifying because they're basically advocating the robotization of humans. And there have been several studies, and I use this frequently because every time basically somebody uses a GPS, I bring it up because I'm that fucking asshole. But they've done studies that show that human beings are losing. We all have navigation pathways in our brain, right, that have helped us navigate where we fucking are for the hundreds of thousands of years that we've been wandering around this fucking planet. And they've done several studies that have shown since the advent of GPS on our phones, those pathways are getting crazy ass cobwebs.
Right.
We are losing our fucking our evolutionary ability to navigate something that's taken hundreds of thousands of years to build up. We're being like, fuck it, I can just stare at this thing and it'll tell me which way to go, and I don't even have to fucking look up from it. That's fucking terrifying. We are letting this technology dumb us down as opposed to help us. Like the idea that technology can help blind folks read, or help people who need to find people to rescue or whatever. That's fucking great. Technology can be used for amazing things. But the fact that technology is helping us become dumber while also surveilling us and sharing that information with governments that have no interest in keeping us safe, that's not something that you should be fucking stoked about. That's right. And I'm not a Luddite. I love technology when it's used for good, but it's like, this is not something that is a blanket good thing that we can just sit back and let happen to us. And I swear to God, you will have to put that fucking data chip into my cold dead hand, because there's no fucking way that anybody will ever put a data chip into my arm while I still draw breath.
I was meaning to tell you, they came in earlier while you were taking a nap, and it's already in the back of your head. So I thought you'd wake up because they put it in with like an average home drill. But anyway, no, I absolutely agree with you. And all of these ethical discussions that he's acting like we're going to have one day, they should have been had many years ago. We should be having them now, and they're not going to be had. All of these decisions are being made by corporations and the military. It's all profit-based, profit and control-based. And it's not the American people, the world people are not making choices on these things. They're just happening to people.
Well, and that's the other, I know we're going to wrap soon, but there's just one more thing that made me think about this.
Really?
Because
I haven't practiced my rapping in a long time.
because this is me speaking as somebody was born in the mid 80s, who has like this perspective of growing up without this kind of technology that we have today. And I think about other studies that they've done that show that kids today that like are in kindergarten and whatnot that use, because they have like iPads and shit in kindergartens all over the country now, well, all over the world too, I assume, but that so that kids are not, they're not writing, so penmanship has plummeted. They're not even teaching cursive overwhelmingly anymore. Not that I use cursive, but the idea of using that, there's a strong connection between writing something and fucking learning it. So they've shown that we're actually making kids dumber by just giving them a screen to look at and interact with, as opposed to other human beings and actually using something that's tactile like a pen and paper. We're actually making kids dumber. And at the same time, we're programming them to literally to think that technology is great. So by the time kids that are 5 now are my age, they probably won't think like me in terms of, this is fucking terrifying. They'll be like, oh yeah, the data chip? Yeah, no, that's something that I've been comfortable with my entire life. So let's go for it.
Well, something I had never, you're talking about kind of the Pavlov dog effect, where every step to their lives, every time they've used technology or advanced technology or whatever, it has helped them. And so they can't even imagine a situation where it's not helpful to them, because you're shown because you go through life experimenting. You do little experiments, and unknowingly, subconsciously, and the experiment that says, is technology helping me, is the yes box is clicked thousands upon thousands of times. And so you don't even analyze whether something could be, harmful to you, technologically speaking. And, I had a guest on, last name Epstein, who's done a lot of good work on Google algorithms and stuff. And he had a great point.
Not Jeffrey.
He's done a lot of great work in the pedophilia area of study. And he was talking about how it's similar with Google search. The key to Google search is that every time it recommends something to us, it's right. And so we think that it's always going to be right. So when it manipulates our search results, we assume that must be right because we've done a million tests and they've always come up right. Yeah, oh, that is exactly what I want, Google. Thank you.
Which is why no one goes to page 2.
Which is why no one goes to page 2. All right, we really do have to wrap up, but you guys, you've been amazing, honestly. I feel like this episode was all you. If you feel like you got $1 worth out of this episode, please head on over to patreon.com/commoncensored. You can get all of Eleanor's work, which is incredible videos, articles, spoken word, music, artkillingapathy.com. My stuff, I've started a second YouTube channel, or I have a second YouTube channel, youtube.com/momentofclarityshow, where you can get all my web exclusive stuff. And of course, Redacted Tonight is on YouTube as well. We love getting your emails and topic suggestions. You can send those to commoncensored@protonmail.com. commoncensored@protonmail.com. And review us on iTunes. We're coming to Toronto. We're playing Toronto, playing Canada. That's in only a couple of weeks. Well, actually, there's not many tickets left. There's like 20 tickets left. leecamp.com/schedule has all of that. Thank you so much. And we're headed over to Patreon to do a couple extra minutes, 10 to 15 to be exact. Keep fighting, everybody.
Act out.